everybody, and welcome to another episode of the React Native Radio podcast. This week on our panel, I guess it's just me this week. I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv, and we have a special guest this week, and that's Tim Jung. Tim, you want to say hello and introduce yourself real quick?
Hey, everyone. My name's Tim Jung. I work at Activision Blizzard, and specifically, I write React Native code for the Call of Duty companion app.
When I'm building a new product, G2I is the company that I call to help me find a developer who can build it. G2I is a hiring platform run by engineers that matches you with React, React Native, GraphQL, and mobile developers that you can trust. Whether you are a new company building your first product or an established company that wants additional engineering help, G2I has the talent you need to accomplish your goals. Go to g2i.co to learn more about what G2I has to offer. In my experience, G2I has linked me up with experienced engineers that can fit my budget. And the G2I staff are friendly and easy to work with. They know how product development works and can help you find the perfect engineer for your stack. Go to g2i.co to learn more about G2I. That's awesome. And I didn't even know there was such a thing, but I don't really play Call of Duty. Do you want to explain real quick what the app is, what it does, what the idea is?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, the Call of Duty companion app is a tool for players of the Call of Duty franchise to basically stay engaged with all of the different Call of Duty games they might be playing. So that means a lot of different things. It means players might be looking at their stats in the app. They might be looking at the latest news, their match history, editing things like their in-game class loadouts, which is like the different guns you have equipped, or earning rewards through like weekly tournament features.
Interesting. So class loadouts, I think that's a term that I'm probably not as familiar with. The tournament stuff I kind of understand. So yeah, what are we talking about here? So you keep them involved, you keep them up to date, and then you let them keep track of other stuff on there?
Right, yeah, that's definitely what it is. So aside from just staying up to date, to kind of break down two of the things you mentioned, the class loadouts is basically in any Call of Duty game, you can equip different things like guns or perks or maybe different grenades. And what we offer through the companion app is a way for players to switch up their loadout and for that to appear in the game. But all of that can just be done through the app. So if you're on the bus or if you're between matches or something, you could just do it right there on your phone.
Oh, interesting. So you do it on your phone, and then the next time you jump on the game, it has everything you want already preloaded.
Yep, exactly. And one of the most popular ways that players use that is, if they're kind of waiting between games or something on their couch, some players find it quicker to just use the app than to swap through the game menus.
That makes sense. Yeah, depending on what kind of interface you have, that could be more or less limited. So,
right, exactly. And to touch on your other thing that you mentioned, which was the weekly tournament, that's basically a way for players to earn in-game rewards through the app. So what happens is someone can create a squad, which other players or their friends can join. And then these squads are placed into tournaments each week with squads of a similar skill level. Then your squad can work toward a specific in-game objective. So it might be like, hey, be the squad that gets the most kills this week. And then that'll unlock, maybe like a loot box or double XP for an hour at the end of the week.
That's cool. I think I've seen something similar with like StarCraft and some of the other games that I've played that are also Blizzard franchises, or Diablo. I think Diablo does it.
Yeah, World of Warcraft had like a companion app. There's definitely kind of like an emerging field of different game studios starting to think about ways to, provide extra value to players and keep players engaged with the franchise, even when they're not in front of, a TV screen.
Yeah, well, it seems like it would work, especially when you're not in front of the screen, because, you need both hands to play the game. So, you're going to be messing with your phone, afterward.
Right, exactly.
So what's it like working for Blizzard? Because I don't know, I've kind of always had this idea in the back of my head that it'd be a lot of fun to work for a game company like them.
Right. So specifically, I actually work for Activision Blizzard.
Okay.
So it's just one big company. It's kind of been this way, I think, for about a decade now. Originally, they merged, and specifically, I work out of the Activision headquarters, which is located in Santa Monica.
Okay.
But it's great. I really couldn't be happier. I couldn't ask for, a place that's has better people working there. My team is super awesome, so huge shout out to them. But overall, just the culture at Activision Blizzard is super positive. In a way, it's laid back because you can play video games at your desk. There is that culture where people really do care about that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's really nice, but people take their job very seriously too. It's definitely like a get your work done, and then we trust you to have fun playing too if you want.
That makes sense. So it's kind of a work hard, play hard.
Yeah, absolutely. But for me, that's the perfect pace.
Yep, makes sense. What's it like being in a gaming company though, where you're not actually writing the game? I mean, you're writing the companion app, so you're not building out storylines or things like that, right?
Yeah. So a lot of what my team ends up having happen, with our release and development cycles, really does revolve around what's going on with Call of Duty at that time. So, when a new game is preparing to come out, when Modern Warfare was coming out at the end of last year, we definitely see an increase in dev activity as we prepare for those release seasons. So it's interesting because, yes, we're not working on games specifically, but we're often thinking about how we're going to build features that are very much related to what's happening in the games. And even beyond that, we work with so many different studios to deliver those features. Recently we've been working with Infinity Ward on the upcoming loadout editor for Modern Warfare. I've had to meet with Treyarch, Sledgehammer Games, and even recently I was working with some of the MLG people, which are kind of based both at Blizzard and at Activision, on some of the Call of Duty League features.
Interesting. So what does that interaction look like then? I mean, are they giving you a rundown of what features they're building into the game, and then you come up with strategies to take advantage of that? Or is somebody else thinking through that and you're essentially just building in what people think they're going to need? Or how does that all tie together?
Right. So as a developer, I'm not a primary person kind of making decisions about what features will end up going in the app. But as a team as a whole, we're definitely, interfacing with those different studios way ahead of schedule, being like, hey, what's going to be in the next game? What things are going to be a high priority that players are going to care about? And then we definitely start theorizing, planning and thinking about what features we'd like to deliver in the companion app to support that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then you build that in there. What's the API like for you guys? I'm assuming it's a private API, but I mean, what does it look like? You're using GraphQL or REST or something else?
Yeah, so we use REST. It's pretty standard. I wouldn't say there's anything particularly crazy going on with it, but there is a lot of different things, different data that we have to interact with because the app supports so many different things. Players are doing so many different things in the app. We have Xbox players, PS4 players, even Steam players. So just the number of endpoints we end up having is very large.
Makes sense. But I'm assuming that, most of that just works fine, across whatever device, because you're connecting to the back-end server and having whatever it does line things up for you.
Yep, exactly. And those same backend services are used by other things we have, my department as a whole does other things too, like the MyCOD website, which would use the same endpoints.
Yeah, makes sense. So can you tell us what features you're working on now, or is that top secret?
Yeah, we can talk about that. Some things are top secret, but right now, one of the biggest things that I'm working on is the next version of the loadout editor. So previously we shipped the loadout editor just for Black Ops 4, which was the previous Call of Duty game before Modern Warfare. And right now we're focusing on making sure that we have a new revamped experience that fits Modern Warfare and allows players to, set up and save their loadouts through the app, just like the previous one.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Now I want to go play the game just so I can use the companion app. Is that weird?
No, I mean, that's one of the best things I could hear for sure. I would definitely encourage everyone to check it out. I think it's pretty cool. I think it's one of the most useful tools. I mean, maybe I'm a little biased, but I think it's a useful tool that actually gives extra value to people. So that's cool to hear.
So what's the release cycle for you, and what's the release cycle for Call of Duty?
Right. So far, Call of Duty has pretty much released on a yearly basis. But we're constantly delivering new features to the app throughout the year. There's definitely a larger effort that goes into the app right prior to release of a new Call of Duty. So last year we were developing features right up to Modern Warfare coming out, and that was our 2.0 version of the app. So because it was a whole new game and there was all these new stats relating to that specific game, that was a huge release. We also kind of tend to target summertime as a time to do a lot of cleanup in the app. We're constantly trying to deliver so many features that we use summer as a time to pay down a lot of our technical debt, maybe do re-architectures of things. That was a huge effort that we did over the summer that ended up resulting in things like vastly better performance in the app. We did stuff like we migrated from React Native navigation to React navigation. So I'd say most of the time, we're just delivering new features throughout the whole year, but then we do have those cleanup periods and then specific periods for the new games.
That makes sense. How do you keep track of your backlog versus your tech debt versus all of that other stuff for your apps?
Yeah, that's definitely a super difficult task, which we're always trying to find ways to improve upon. The code base is very large. So to make sure, like first and foremost, that we don't acquire too much technical debt is we try to keep the team very unified on, what kind of architecture we're using, what are the best practices for writing components. And part of that too is about having really good documentation on the team. But to keep track of our backlog specifically, we use Jira. So anytime, there's something that needs to be fixed in the app, like a bug, or even if there's some technical debt, an engineer, knows, oh, hey, this component could be done a little bit better, but because we're on a very tight time frame right now, we can still make that Jira ticket. And then later, when things slow down a little bit, we can introduce that ticket into our current sprint to resolve it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I've just got so many questions. How many other teams are you interacting with? I mean, are you doing all of it? The programming, the UI, I'm assuming the back end's a separate team.
Right. Yeah. So there's actually a lot of different teams. First off, there's the React Native mobile team, which were 5 developers total. So beyond us, we have a UI and a UX team. They're coming up with our designs, what the user experience is going to be like. We have a content management team. They help us with stuff like getting localizations ready for the app. We have our entire, blog team, which is, creating blog content and news articles, which are going to appear in the app. We do have the entire backend team. We have a backend team that's local inside the Activision headquarters, but then, more broadly, we also have Demonware, which is a company that I think exists in Ireland, maybe Dublin specifically, and they're just a whole company that just does backend stuff for Call of Duty. So we have to interact with them as well. We're also interacting with the individual studios. So we really end up, on the mobile team, touching and interacting with like a huge number of individuals to deliver these features.
Right. And you just keep track of all those interactions with Jira, or do you go like sit at somebody else's desk for a bit and make sure they understand what you're doing, or how does that communication work?
Yeah, it's definitely both of those things and more. A lot of it is we have a project manager who she helps keep everything kind of organized for us and helps us stay in contact with everyone. But a lot of it too is that specific engineers, might kind of silo off a little bit and focus on specific things. So, for instance, recently we had Call of Duty League, which is like our new esports initiative, come out, and we delivered a bunch of features inside the app related to that. And I built all that. And it was kind of me interacting with the Call of Duty League team, through emails or going down to Blizzard for a day for some meetings to just make sure everything was aligned and that all the requirements were understood for what they wanted delivered.
That makes sense. How much interaction do you have with actual players, right? So if there's a league, I'm assuming the league has teams. So how much feedback do you get from them, or is it mostly through the Call of Duty team?
Well, feedback from players is actually super important to us. It's a huge part of why our app score in the stores has gone up a lot over the last several months. We started putting things in the app like user feedback prompts, where we can actually have users input, what they do or don't like about the app. And then we really do care about looking at that stuff. We compile it into a master spreadsheet where, we can understand what players want. We do pay attention to things like the Modern Warfare subreddit right now is something that we take note of. And we have like a support team that you can contact, or we'll sometimes reach out to players when we see issues, maybe on Reddit or something that they're talking about. So yeah, player feedback is huge for us. And that's something that really matters and has helped us get to building better stuff for our users.
That's cool. I've kind of asked a lot of the process questions and organizational questions and things like that, which is, it's interesting to me just kind of from a standpoint of, oh, hey, how do you run all this stuff? And I'm assuming that there are companion app teams for other games. Do you work together with them? Do you manage any other companion apps, or is it just a team per companion app, or how does that all fall out?
So right now, just where I work, we're the only companion app team. I know that down at Blizzard, they run like the World of Warcraft companion app. I don't know who those people are. So,
okay.
But no, currently we're pretty much just isolated off. We're like the Call of Duty companion app team, and that's our focus. But the work other teams are doing is super interesting to me, because I do enjoy seeing how that space is growing and evolving amongst different companion apps.
Right. Infinite Red has been designing and shipping and building web and mobile applications for 10 years. They're experts in React Native and passionate advocates for remote work. They also host North America's only React Native conference, Chain React, attended by hundreds of developers all over the world. I actually went this last year. It was a ton of fun. If you start a project after hearing about them on this podcast, they'll give you 2 free tickets. You can learn more at radio.infinite.red. So all the different games have different teams working on their companion apps.
Well, not every game has a companion app necessarily. It's kind of a new trend in video games. So that's part of why it's really interesting to work on this team, is because really we might be the largest companion app team for a video game right now. So a lot of the stuff that we're building and doing is really pioneering what a companion app could or should be.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Well, it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. I want to change gears a little bit more into the technology. So you're using React Native to build these. I'm always curious how companies come to that conclusion, right? Because there's always that push and pull between, well, should we do native apps? Should we do something like React Native, where it's native, but it's got a JavaScript bridge that manages a lot of the business logic, or maybe we'll go with a Cordova Ionic, like complete web technology base. How did you all make that decision?
So that decision actually predates my time on the team. There was like a period where it was being developed for a year before it was actually released. And I joined like right after it launched and have been working there for like a year and 3 months or something. But I have heard stories about those decisions and why it happened. And actually, I think it's pretty clear cut is that React Native meant that the team could move as quickly as possible. And there's really a few points behind that. When you have two different native teams, one for native Android and one for native iOS, it can be really difficult to keep all the different features synchronized. I used to be an Android developer at a startup where that was very much a constant problem, and it made consistent delivery really difficult. So because the companion app has these very rapid fire release windows because of the games coming out so frequently, that was a huge decision. But beyond that, I think the other reason that they chose to do React Native is just that it's so well supported. It's using JavaScript. So at times we've even been able to pull on other developers. Right now, we just had a developer move from a Vue project over to the Call of Duty companion app, and he's staying on the team now. But it was easy to bring him over to join our team because it was JavaScript still. So when we had that demand for another developer, instead of having to train someone up, we could just steal someone who was familiar with all the Call of Duty stuff from a different project. So yeah, definitely for us, it's all about just the support and the ability to move quickly.
That's cool. And that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting to me too, just, where it seems to make a difference and where in a lot of cases it doesn't seem to really matter, right? So you going with a native solution like React Native over a native solution like Swift and then Kotlin, it's like, oh, well, we just build one app instead of two, and then we just manage the differences, and it saves a bunch of time, effort, and we can bring people in who have basically cross-functional skills. And in this case, it's React as the cross-functional skill.
Exactly.
So you get in with React Native. Are you using something like Expo or?
No, we actually don't use Expo. I know that that's super popular, but for our team, we just decided that we didn't want to add anything extra. There's just so much going on, it feels like, with Xcode already, and how many different things we have in our code base that every time we add anything to the code base, it's an opportunity to invite more responsibility to the code base.
Yeah, that's fair. I have to wonder then, what about state management?
So we do use Redux for state management.
So how did you come to that conclusion over MobX, or just, having some convenient little database job running in the background?
Again, it basically came down to support. Redux is kind of the most popular used state management. So popular to us is good, because it means that if we do need to hire additional developers, or if we need to bring people onto the team, or if we're facing a complicated issue, that we need to go look at documentation for, we can trust that Redux is probably going to be the best supported or best documented for us.
That makes sense. The other thing that I see is that if you bring somebody in who has a Vue background or an Angular background, and they've worked with Vuex or NGRX, then they understand the pattern that Redux is working on, even if they haven't used the library directly.
Exactly. And that's exactly what just happened to us with the developer I mentioned just a little bit ago too.
Yeah, makes sense. So how are you using Redux?
Yeah, so we actually have a lot of application state that is used throughout the app. So for example, if you are an Xbox user, we get some data on your account saying you're an Xbox user, and that might change up a lot of things throughout the app. Or you might have something like friends. You get some kind of data back that gives the user's entire friends list, and then throughout the app in various places, you have to access that data. So we had to think really hard about what kind of things are going to be used like multiple times throughout the application, and make sure that we store that in Redux.
That makes sense. And then you just have a standardized way that everybody knows to use Redux so that you don't wind up with too much of a mess.
Yeah, exactly. We end up kind of just following the same general pattern of code. And that's something that we try to do just in general throughout the code base, is we kind of try to coalesce around a common way to do something. And then everyone tries to essentially mimic that.
Right. So since you're kind of keeping it all close to the vest and you're not introducing a bunch of crazy stuff, and it seems like most of what you're doing is just shoveling data this way or that way using Redux, I'm guessing you don't really need a whole lot of native code because you're not really diving into the capabilities of the phone all that much.
Right. One of the cool things about the project, or maybe not cool, but more convenient, is that we do mostly avoid having to write too much native code. And that does go back to like our whole theory or our whole philosophy on wanting to move as quickly as possible. So anytime that we have to introduce more native code into the code base, it definitely, is more responsibility to think about. But we do sometimes have to write native code, like for certain things like push notifications, we've had to write native code, or sometimes certain features, just there's not a good solution unless we're writing native code. So one thing would be like our heat maps that we show in the app, which kind of show where like players are dying or getting kills on specific maps. To be able to zoom those, like with a pinch to zoom, needs to be written with native code.
I gotcha. And I'm assuming that's not terribly involved to do.
No, it's not too bad. Luckily, we can keep it pretty minimal. And we basically have some engineers on the team. Like me, I used to be an Android developer. So when we needed stuff written in Java for push notifications, I was able to hop in and do that. And then, we have another developer who's more familiar with iOS development, so he can kind of handle that stuff too.
Makes sense. I'm a little curious, since you have a background with Android. I mean, how do you feel about the move from Java to Kotlin?
Java to Kotlin. So I'm actually not super familiar with Kotlin.
Okay.
When I was writing Android code, Java was still the dominant language in the space. So I kind of exited that whole area and went into JavaScript, like right when Kotlin was breaking that barrier.
That makes sense. Well, and you probably can still write apps in Java just because both languages compile to JVM bytecode and you're off to the races. So
yeah, absolutely. And since we write native code so rarely on the companion app, Java has still sufficed when we do have to write that.
That makes sense. You also mentioned that you migrated from React Native Navigation to React Native Navigation. Can you tell me why? Because just to give a little bit of background to the listener, what I find is that when I talk to people about migrating from one major component of any app from one library to another, it seems like there's a lot of overhead to that. And about half of the time it winds up not being worth it. So why'd you do it? And what was the outcome there?
Yeah, I totally hear you. It was a lot of overhead. I mentioned briefly earlier, we spent a lot of the previous summer rewriting a lot of different things in the app. And one of those was navigation and switching over to React navigation instead. Essentially, why we chose to do it is it goes back to the same philosophy that I've mentioned a few times, is that it felt better supported overall. But not just that, we ended up feeling like React Native navigation was actually kind of confusing and complex to use at times, especially as our code base got so massive. So we were starting to think ahead, and we want to do things like support features like deep linking throughout the app. And it seemed really complicated to do deep linking with React Native navigation. So those were huge parts of why. Another reason it kind of started to make sense, or like just some more points in React Navigation's favor, was with stuff like React navigation screens, there wasn't really as much of an argument anymore that React native navigation had better performance. We couldn't really see huge performance increases there. So that was then less of a barrier to want to switch.
That makes sense. So was it worth it?
Yes, I would definitely say so. Everyone is much happier on the React navigation. I think we're still working on some deep linking stuff, but It is much more comfortable now. I would say that the code base is easier to understand now that we have React navigation. And now we're excited to, right now we're on React Navigation 4. React Navigation 5 just came out, and we're even excited that we think it'll be a decently easy upgrade for us.
Right. So I've got some notes here about rewriting from classes to functional hooks.
Yep.
So what happened there, and how did that work out?
Yeah, basically one of our goals, is to stick to, I wouldn't call hooks a trend. I call it kind of, it's becoming the standard in React. So we really want to keep up on top of those things. That's important because if we stick to classes for too long and classes go out of favor and there's less documentation on it, it starts to become technical debt. So we were upgrading, I think we were stuck all the way on like React Native 55. And over the summer, we finally got like the time and the space to upgrade to 59, which meant that we could start using all these hooks. So they were new and shiny and exciting for us. So we definitely started refactoring or rewriting pretty much everything in the code base away from classes into using hooks instead, which was a huge effort to do, but it was super worth it because I think just navigating around through, all the files and looking at the code, it's so much cleaner, in my opinion, at least, to read other developers' code and understand what's happening just in something that's all hooks instead of classes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you depend on different structures when you're using classes than when you use hooks. And the hooks tend to be more focused on life cycle and events than the class leads you to run on. So that makes a lot of sense.
Right. Even like looking back, just the hooks just are so easy to understand. Everything from use state, all these things are just so straightforward. Whereas, I think back to classes and I just feel kind of haunted by things like component will mount and all these things that felt like, you could go read docs about them and understand them, but I just feel like they're not as cut and dry as what we have now.
Nice. Another note that I'm seeing here is about performance improvements using Redux and using React.memo. Do you want to just talk briefly about those and how those gave you performance improvements?
Yeah, definitely. One thing that we have to consider when, we have a really large number of monthly active users, and that means that they can have a lot of different devices, and a lot of those devices end up being really old devices, and we want to keep supporting them because there's a significant enough number of them that we wouldn't want to drop support and leave those players like out in the cold, not able to use the app. So the issue, though, became with these older devices is that if we weren't paying attention to, taking care of performance and making sure everything was good there, then we would start getting crashes or significant slowdowns on those devices. And that wasn't good. So it kind of became, something that was more on our radar, became more important to us. So we started to have to really think and make sure that the code base was in a state where it was performing well. And part of that was making sure that our app wasn't redundantly ever storing data. And that's really where Redux came in and helped us do that. Whereas before, sometimes if we were sloppy, a screen might make two different calls that end up having similar data. And every time you do something like that, you just end up having more stuff in the phone's memory, which was dangerous on those old phones. So just really being as, what's the word I'm looking for, as minimal as possible in what data we're keeping, and making sure there's no redundancies helped immediately. The other thing was definitely React Memo. Full credit to a different engineer named Ricky. He really started to pay attention to how many times different screens were rendering. And because we have so many child components going on inside these other components, if anything, little thing was changing on the screen, it was causing these redraws. And if you had all these nested child components, they'd get redrawn multiple times and all these things. So by focusing on using React Memo more, we were able to get those screen draws, or draws for specific components, way down, which was a huge performance increase.
That makes a ton of sense. So you keep saying this is a massive code base, but I don't think you've told us how big it is.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Basically, to break it down a little bit, just kind of focusing on the organization, is we have like a components folder, which has screens. Then we kind of see it as having these other things, which we call base components, which are like our dumbest components, like buttons, drop-down menus, those kind of things. Then we have another folder called shared components. These are components that can occur throughout the app in various different places. It might be something like an avatar, a friend tile card, or something like that. And then we have another category, which is like feature specific components. Those are components that are only going to appear on something specific. So right now we're building the loadout screen, and that might have specific feature components, which will only occur in that part of the app. So all four of those directories can have, probably tens of different files in them for each of the components or screens. Beyond that, we have a full navigation folder. We have stuff for Redux. We have tons of image assets. So there's so many different branding files for things like PlayStation or all the various Call of Duties. So though I don't have a hard number on how big it is, it's getting into the hundreds of files. And that can be challenging to maintain, and it can be challenging to make sure that every developer on the team knows what's happening and what the current state of the code base is in.
So how do you keep track of all that stuff?
So probably the most important part is making sure everything stays organized and making sure everyone understands where things should live. So if we're really good at naming, if we're really good at setting up our folders, then when someone hops in and they're like, oh, I need to go build this brand new thing, it should be immediately obvious to them where they would want to put that thing. Beyond just that, documentation is really key for us. So just, having pages that explain what components do a little better, making sure we explain what certain parameters for a component mean. We keep things like feature notes on what specific features in the app do. So if you ever end up having to go fix a bug on a part of the code base that you didn't work on, it should also be obvious what that part of the code base is doing to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey folks, this is Charles Max Wood, and I just launched my book, The Max Coder's Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job. It's up on Amazon. We self-published it. I would love your support. If you want to go check it out, you can find it there, The Max Coder's Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job. Have a good one. Max out. I think the things that have caused me the most issues that you've discussed here is mostly just knowing where stuff goes.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, then I get in, especially on the bigger code bases, it's like, why is this a problem? And where in the heck is the thing to, where's the class or component or whatever that I'm looking for to fix it? So,
right. And this is something that has been an effort for us and an evolving effort for us for a long time. We're still, even now, constantly starting to think of ways to improve that process of adding new folders and where things live, because over time we just keep coming up with different or better ideas, or we run into problems. We find out, oh, that way that we were organizing things actually ended up being kind of too confusing. Let's move to this instead. So it's definitely it's a work in progress and we keep refining it. But yeah, it's such a worthwhile thing to spend time on, because if you do it right, your team really can move a lot quicker.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, you mentioned earlier that you didn't have a great rating on the App Store, and now you do. Is there something that you attribute that to?
Definitely. I would say it is a mix of things, but so what originally happened was the app launched right around the time when Black Ops 4 was coming out. Like, that's got to be like a year and a half ago now. And it was launch of the app. We hadn't been battle tested out in the wild yet or anything. So if there was data problems or performance issues, we were having a huge influx of new users coming in and experiencing these issues. And so right out the gate, it basically launched with a 2.0 on the App Store. So our goal then became, okay, how do we get these numbers up? Like, what do we have to deliver to our users to get that score way up? So now today it's a 4.8 on iOS, and I think like a 4.5 on Android. But yeah, it's definitely a mix of different things that contributed to that. I think some of the things I discussed already contributed, like performance. The number one reason we were getting 1 stars and still do, and something that we're still working on is, if people crash, that's never good. If certain data doesn't load, and it's really hard to track all the different ways we could fail, because players can end up having such different account states from each other. They could be Xbox players. They could have never played Modern Warfare. They could have played 2,000 hours of Modern Warfare. They could be a totally different level than their friends. They could have, there's just so many different permutations to think about, that paying attention to those permutations and making sure that every single player was going to have a good experience in the app is part of how we started to lift that score up. Beyond that, I'd say we started to just refine what kind of features we were delivering to players. The more useful the features become, or especially like focusing it more on rewards for players, seems to have been very positive as well. Mm-hmm. Basically just giving people a really good reason to continue to use the app, and paying attention to the kind of things that they want to see added to the app has helped us a lot.
Makes sense. What features in particular have you worked on? I think you mentioned the loadout editor, but are there other things that you've built or been specifically involved in?
Yeah, definitely. The loadout editor was probably the most complex feature, because basically when you make a loadout, and this one was for Black Ops 4, there's so many different rules to what constitutes a valid or invalid loadout. Like, you might be able to equip the certain combination, but a different combination would be invalid. So that feature was super complex to build, because essentially we had to reverse engineer, whatever was going on inside the Black Ops 4 loadout editor, but rethinking how it could work in a mobile context. Beyond that feature, some of the other stuff I worked on is we have the ops section, which is the whole squad tournament thing, and basically offering players a way to compete to earn the rewards. I've done other stuff like when Modern Warfare was going to be teased, we actually did a push notification. And what I built was basically when users' phones received the push notification, it played like the iconic Modern Warfare night vision sound. So that was like another thing. There's so much stuff. I've probably touched a crazy amount of places inside that code base, but those are some of like the ones that I was most excited for.
Awesome. Are you testing the code base and things like that as well?
Yeah, testing is something that we're probably not doing well enough, but we're getting better at pretty quickly. For instance, we recently hired, he's basically a QA / software developer and test hybrid. He's been writing a lot of automated tests for the app. So earlier when I mentioned that a user's account can be in lots of different states, lots of different permutations of, what games they own or how they've interacted with the franchise, he's been building a lot of tests which will manually go through the app and make sure all those different combinations are accounted for.
Nice. Cool. Is there anything else that people ought to know about building an app like this?
I'd say if I had to say, probably the most important thing, in my opinion, for building an app on this scale, we have so many users, we have so many features coming out so rapidly. I'd say the most important thing to think about is your team and, the people who are on it. So I really can't say enough about how much I love my team, because they are all incredibly motivated individuals. They're super passionate, not just about the technology we're using, but really delivering experiences for players that players care about. I think what's super hard too is making sure that your team is unified around one single vision. So the fact that everyone on my team shows up every day and is actually super caring about being on the same page, about working together, about, staying up to date on the latest React Native technology goes so far in making sure that we can keep delivering this project or delivering this product as quickly as we can.
Makes sense. One other thing that occurred to me while you were talking was that, do you have any real-time features? So something happens in the app, or something happens in the game that reflects in the app, or something happens in the app that reflects in the game? Yeah,
definitely. You could say that the loadout editor is real time. The second that you push a loadout up to the game, you'll get a prompt saying hey, new loadout available. So that would be an example. But yeah, everything, the data we get, definitely you're doing a pull to refresh for some of it, but very quickly after a match completes, you can go check your stats for that match right in the app afterward. Even thinking outside the game, recently, the Call of Duty League esports stuff has been kicking off.
Yes.
So I just put some features into the app that are, whenever there's a live broadcast happening on YouTube for an event, now you get a widget on your homepage, kind of showing the stream and allowing you to interact with it. And it kind of is a call to action to go look at the Call of Duty League page as well in the app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing that I'm curious about there is, are you using something like WebSockets, or are you just checking in periodically to see if there's something new?
So we're not using any WebSockets yet, but I can't talk about it, but we are thinking of features that would start using WebSockets in the future.
Nice. How do you decide what goes into the app? Or, if somebody comes up with an idea, maybe you decide that's not quite right for the app or not quite right yet. How do you build that out?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So let's say somebody comes up with an idea. Oh, we should put this into the app. How do you decide whether or not it makes it in, or when it makes it in?
Yeah. So what's actually cool is, a lot of these decisions are being made by our directors. They're thinking about what's best for the app. But what's really cool is, as an engineer, I do feel like I have a meaningful chance to get stuff that I suggest into the app. One feature recently I suggested and was super gunning for was weekly rewards. Basically, every single week, as long as you log into the app, you get a pop-up saying, hey, here's some kind of reward for showing up. Thank you. I think that was super useful because, it keeps users coming back. But when we think about, should this go into the app? Should this not go into the app? We're definitely collaborating as a team, saying, hey, what's in our pipeline? What's priority? What's tied to things that are coming out in the games soon? What would be meaningful for our users to have in their hands, and, drive their interest in coming back. So this one actually ended up getting bumped up in priority because, as a team, we basically decided oh yeah, we actually do think that this would be something really nice to give to players, and really make them happy.
Makes sense. All right. Well, we're kind of getting toward the end of the time here. If people want to check in with you or ask you questions or anything like that, I'm assuming you're online somewhere.
Yes, the best place to interact with me is definitely Twitter. Please follow me. I have no followers. I have less than 100. So every single one I get is a little dear to my heart. So you can follow me at Tim Jung. Yeah, so definitely check me out.
Awesome. Well, the next section of the show is picks. I'll go ahead and start us off with some picks. So I finally started watching the latest season of The Expanse on Amazon Prime. I remember finding out that Sci-Fi had canceled it and being very sad, and then finding out that Amazon Prime had picked it up and being very happy. So I'm really excited to see where this season goes. They've tended to stick pretty close to the books, so I don't know that I'm going to be that surprised with anything that happens, but I've really enjoyed the series. So The Expanse on Amazon Prime is definitely a pick for me.
Yeah, that's
Oh, go ahead.
I watched the first season of that and I thought it was fantastic. So definitely check that out.
Yep. Another pick that I have, and this is something that I'm going to start live streaming, building this app in React Native, just because I've talked about it. I've played with it a bit, but I want to build like an actual app and then push it to the App Store, which is something that I haven't done, right? I've just built my own apps and kind of stuck them on my phone. And so this app, we've been playing a game, my wife and I, and whoever's around. It's called Legendary. I think it came out in 2012, and basically it's a deck building game. It's a cooperative game, and it's based on Marvel. So you've got Marvel heroes, and you've got Marvel villains and Marvel mastermind villains, and you work together to defeat the mastermind. But then you're also working to like whoever defeats the most villains gets the most points and they win. So there's a little bit of a competitive nature to it too. So anyway, definitely worth checking out. So I'm going to pick Legendary as well.
Cool.
How about you? Do you have some picks for us?
Yeah, definitely. I'm also going to kick it off with a video game pick. Hopefully that's fitting since I work in that industry.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I'm going to pick Dota Underlords. Basically, it's a game by Valve, the same people who make like Counter-Strike and Half-Life and all that. But it's a auto chess game that's available on PC and your phone. It has crossplay between the two. And you basically place these heroes on what is essentially a chessboard and try to make different combinations of heroes. And then it's kind of like a battle royale where you're facing off against other people each round. And your goal is to essentially just build a better team than them and defeat them on like this chessboard because they automatically battle once you've like had the piece placing phase of the game. It's super fun. I play it so much. I ended up in the top 100 players in the world for a while. So check it out. It's free right now. I think they're going to put a battle pass in. I think like at the end of the month, they're going to like actually officially launch the game. So like now's a good time to really get into it. If you like strategy stuff, it's perfect.
Nice.
My second pick, I'd say, is a novel called Perdido Street Station. If you like stuff that's kind of really weird, it's like fantasy, steampunk, kind of like this alien world set in the future, focuses a lot on stuff like just the strange cultures and interactions of these different strange creatures that live in this city. It's really fascinating. It's almost too hard to explain what it's about. So definitely read like a synopsis on it and check it out if that's your kind of thing.
Nice. Thanks, Tim, for coming and talking to me and just, sharing your experience building a companion app. This is really cool. And I'm kind of tempted to figure out, okay, what other applications are there for companion apps? And, I've been looking at building an app for the podcast network, but I hadn't really thought of it as kind of a companion app to the experience we create here. So that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, you should definitely try to reach out, find more people doing this stuff, because to me, it's super interesting too. And I'm sure there's a lot of different teams doing a lot of different really cool stuff in that space.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this up, folks. And we'll have another episode next week. In the meantime, Max out.
Later.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.